Okay, good morning. This is Dr. Garais. This is October 16th, 2020, Friday, 9 a.m. This is MED260, Exams and Specialty Procedures. And if those of you who had a class with me already know that this is golden contact information. Contact me often, contact me early. Don't guess on what's due and when it's due. And I have my contact information here as well. There will always be like extra notes, extra videos and things here in the announcements. Now, this is considered a laboratory class, and you can tell here because it says Leela, which is lecture and lab. So there are 2 days that we're gonna meet, and it's typically in week 6, week 7. I'll post the exact dates in announcements. And this particular course, it's Christmas is coming up. So week 10 is, we're going to try to wrap stuff up week 9 because I'm sure many of you will be going out of town or have holiday things to be done. So as you can see here, week 10 is empty and it's reserved for your final exam, but most likely we're going to try to get the final exam done by week 9, which for this particular course is feasible. So let's look at the course syllabus and see what's going on. Let's see if it'll cooperate. Sometimes it takes a little bit. Well, before this thing warms up, exams and specialty procedures, it pretty much goes through what it says. The specific exams to the specific departments that you may or may not be working for. And so if you go into obstetrics, there's a set of most common things that we do in obstetrics. And if you go in to another department or another specialty, there's certain things that we do. Another thing that this course does, and that's why it has a laboratory component, is that it reviews some of your MED 140 items, and if you haven't gone through MED 140 basic clinical procedures, that's okay, because we'll go over it for you in laboratory. The laboratories are mandatory. Therefore, if you cannot make it, I need to know now. If you feel uncomfortable about going to campus due to the quarantine, due to maybe you have family members who are high risk, please, I need to know that like now, this week, so that I can give you alternative assignments. But unfortunately, it does not preclude you from not having to pay your laboratory fee. So what else do I have to talk about? That's it. So now, what do we go through?
How much is the laboratory fee? I don't remember ever having to pay for that.
It's somewhere there in your tuition. If you look at it line by line, it's there somewhere. But there's a laboratory fee that everyone pays when you pay a lab class. If you look at the cost of your lab classes, they're a little bit more than your lecture classes in theory.
Gotcha.
But because in the beginning of the quarantine, they were asking like, oh, okay, since I don't have to go to lab, but the laboratory is part, and unfortunately, you guys are in a hands-on class. I actually was trying to ask permission if you guys can come in more than twice, but that was batted down because the current statistics of the current students who were COVID positive, they've increased. Not so much, but they're increased beyond the current 1.33% acceptable that's in Alexandria.
Wow.
The good news is that all students who in health science were COVID positive, they are now no longer COVID positive. They're all back to work. They all work in medical facilities. They all work in high-risk medical facilities, and none of them were hospitalized, and no family members were affected.
Well, that's
Good. That is
So
good.
that begs the question, doesn't it? Right?
Yeah.
All right. It goes. So, and also I was looking at some reports this morning. I'm going to sift through them to see which which stuff is BS. And I think this is a student. I got to go answer this because a student's
Okay.
trouble logging in. Hold up. Good morning, Dr. Garais. Yes. Hello. Yes. Good morning. What can I help? I'm in the middle of a class. So, are you in my class looking for my class? Oh, Ms. Firmino, I will call you after my class. Thank you. Okay, all right, bye. Because I'm looking for a student who was just registered this morning, like about 20 minutes ago.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, everything goes to the last minute because of, if financial aid has to clear you and all that stuff.
Right.
So what are we doing? It goes, so back to what I was, for some of you who are in my anatomy physiology class, even the great Dr. Fauci said that it is almost now in this atmosphere impossible to remove politics from science, and I found that statement both true and false at the same time. True, yes, because it's happening, but false is no, it's not. Just look at the facts, right? So let's look at the facts. Just look at our data alone. I have 72 advisees. Seven of them in the last 6 months are COVID positive. All of them worked in a facility that had high risk personnel in it. So if they all work in a facility, that means they glove up, they mask up, they do strict PPE. Then how'd they get it? So if the mask PPE is so effective, then how'd they get it? Right? But remember, our anatomy and physiology, we studied the chain of infection and how things go. They got it because why? Because those were I interviewed all 7 of them. Guess what underlying thing that all of them had? All of them had massive work hours. All of them have children. So they were all
stress factor.
They were all stressed out. And what happens when you're all stressed out?
Your immune system gets lower.
And then what? It goes, if your cortisol,
you're more susceptible for diseases and illnesses at that point.
Exactly. And that's why Fairfax County now opened it up to a small population of their children, because our children typically stressed out.
Right.
Right. Not in the way that adults are. And also it goes, so they did their data. I was at the meeting where the big hullabaloo was a whole bunch of parents were like, how dare Fairfax County open up the schools? And the Fairfax County was trying to explain that they didn't just open it up for laughs, right? And actually, they're still not opening it up. They only opened it up for like less than 1% of their student population. So that is what this class also teaches you. You have to look at data. For example, if your patient is sick, you got to get the clinician has to get to the main root and the cause and the diagnosis. And the only way to do that is through tests. So like a classic example is my wife. For the last 20 years, she always looks in the mirror and goes, I'm anemic. I feel it. I feel tired, more tired than all. She's been saying that to me. I've known her for 25 years. She's been saying that to me for 25 years, almost every morning. I feel it. I feel anemic. What happens when we take labs? Does she have any anemia? No. So I tell her, you don't have anemia. You don't have to take iron. You don't have to do any of that. I think I should eat liver. All right. But again, remember, our patient is a holistic thing. There's emotions. There's also superstitions. I have them. Right. I have biases that make, and fears that make absolutely no sense. Right. But here in the clinical world, we have to look at data, and that's called
diagnosis and different. I can't even say the word right now.
It's called evidence-based medicine.
Okay.
I don't do any management for my patient unless I have evidence, and that's what an exam should be. So
Mhm.
part of that evidence is here. You have to take a proper medical history because you need to know the story. And that's why when I talk to all the students, because I talked to them for quite a bit, and I wasn't really doing a formal medical history, but just talking to them, the story kind of elaborated out. And then I asked, oh, when you got sick, anything else going on in your life? Oh, I got into a car accident. And then the other one, me and my mom got out of sorts and I kicked her out of my house. And then you're like, oh, I saw other stressors other than them working at a high, because at a high risk facility, right? Because I'm looking at I'm looking at my daughter who is a nurse, works in a high risk facility. Why doesn't she have COVID? I'm looking at my brother-in-law. He actually works in an infectious COVID. His staff are the staff who do all the testings in this tertiary hospital, and it's a hospital in Chicago. It has a lot of patients. Why doesn't he have it? Right? But you look at all the people in the house where my brother-in-law lives, everyone else got it. And it makes sense. Everyone else, when you're sedentary and you're worried about the future, when you're in nursing, the only thing you got to worry about is today's job and the things that I have to do for my patient. It's a very limited scope. But if you're at home with your own thoughts, right? You're watching CNN or whatever news body you have. Don't you think that would generate fear and generate and then also all of us have experienced it, being down here in our basement, right? And not being able to go out, not being not, and also there's also this other stressor that I read in the Journal of American Psychiatric Association. There are a lot of people who don't want to go out because they don't want to get into any altercations with other people regarding, their mask or if they cough. My daughter sneezed in the gym the other day and some guy was looking at her sideways. And then of course, what I did, I commented and he and I got into a little exchange. And then I was thinking, how did that happen? Right? Because we're all wearing masks but again, it's part of the fear, right? So again, while looking at our patient holistically, you got to look at their medical history, what's going on in their lives, what went on in their lives. And the other thing we're going to talk about, of course, if we're going to talk about history, we're going to have to talk about charting and documentation because the majority of errors in the hospital are due to medical terminology and charting. So we have to add that in there. Physical exam is also, we're going to touch on as well. So you could see here a little bit, those of you who are in MED 140, my basic clinical course, you're going to be seeing certain topics twice, but that's okay because the more times you see it, the more you get used to it. So medical history, physical exam. But nowadays, the doctor is in such a rush. How many of you actually had a real physical exam? Head to toe assessment. The doctor touched everything from your hair to your toes. I've never experienced one. That was my training, right? I'm in internal medicine. So in the second I became a resident is the second we started throwing all that stuff out. And if you were in my other classes, I always talked about the analogy of, when we're driving, the first day you drove, right? You actually stopped at stop signs, you 10 and 2, you check left, check right, check left again. But what happens over time? Now I drive, now my wife goes, you absolutely ignore stop signs. And I go, no, I don't. And then everyone in the car always goes, hey. And I go, what? I now ignore stop signs. It's just now part of who I am. And and it's very, very dangerous because why? The slippery slope. At one time, 30 years ago, I drove very, very, well, who am I kidding? I did not. But in theory, I drove very, very, I actually paid attention. Now, those of us driving on the highway, how many times I'm texting? I'm going like 90 miles per hour on 495, and I'm texting, I'm yelling at my kids. Dangerous mix. And you could see if you apply that to medicine, if I start ignoring that, and they start ignoring the protocols, what's going to happen? It's a slippery slope to actual negligence. Another thing we're going to be talking about is supply, because part of your job your future job as a medical assistant, and hopefully you guys move up and on, and future job as a nurse, is to make sure that the doctor has all the things they need to get the test done. Because when the doctor goes into that room, the doctor needs to know, or maybe I can't really say the doctor anymore, because a lot of people who do the physical examination nowadays, it could be the nurse, it could be the physician's assistant, right? It could be another technician. It is much more efficient if the medical assistant knows what's going on, has everything all set up in the proper way, so that, you know, we could see the patient, boom, get him out. Especially nowadays with the COVID protocols, we need to see the patient as quick as possible, clean down that room, and get it ready for the next person. And those of you who are in MED260, basic clinical procedures, we go through all of that as well. And that's why that's why I was asking, can we please have another laboratory? Because there's not enough time, like 2 hours here, 2 hours there. It's not enough time for me to show you everything. But again, we have to go back to strict protocols. And my offer still stands. When all of this is over, and it will be over one day, maybe no time soon, but when this is all over and you guys need to come back and really practice, give me a call and we'll come and revisit the laboratories on campus, okay? Or if you want some tutoring, I've had some success of doing some Zoom stuff where the student like does stuff, you know, to the family member on Zoom, and I'll use my son as a guinea pig here, and then we can kind of mirror each other. It's kind of weird, but it worked last term, so I'm up for that as well.
Okay, thank you.
Physical examination, specialty exam, especially that. Another big thing that we're going to use and we're going to do in lab, and I wish we had more time, because I love doing mock surgery. I usually take some of the pig parts from your anatomy and physiology people, and I keep it, and then we sew them up. They cut them open, and then we cut them open, we sew them up, and we play. And we'll do that. We'll do that in lab, but and everyone gets to play the role of like circulating nurse, and we actually go through like and how to like autoclave and all that. We're still gonna do that, but it won't be in that grand theater that I used to do because of time. But you'll get to experience all of that in laboratory. So, one of the laboratories is, and I'll show you the suture materials and stuff like that. But again, in the past, when we were a true on the ground campus, I taught you guys how to suture. I taught you guys how to cut. But we can do that again. We could do that, but it'll be much quicker than it would be in the past. We just have to be efficient with our time. Another thing that we do is we show you guys how to use assisted and ambulatory devices. I'm just going to demo it, or I'm just going to show you guys videos. But those of us who already work as LPNs, or they work as CNAs, already know that this is vital on how to get your patient in and out of the bed, in and out of the on the chair to their assistive device, and also properly training your patient to properly use your assistive device, for example, crutches and a walker and all that, because that is one of the major critical areas of a high-risk patient falls when they transition from the bed to their assistive device. So it's a kind of, it's an easy topic, but it's kind of important.
Right.
Last but not least, we touch on alternative medicine practice. Again, we're now down to 9 weeks because of the term and because of the holidays. So, but this course is it's got enough wiggle room in it, especially if the majority of it now is lecture.
Well, what do you mean about alternative medical medicine practices? I'm sorry.
You know, like herbal medicines.
Oh, okay. I'm like,
I think I touch on it because remember, Western medicine, which is the medicine that we all practice, is highly documented. But there's a lot of other stuff going on in the world like here's a classic example. When acupuncture, the
Mhm.
scientific community, there's half of them who says the acupuncture totally works, but the problem is they can't define it, and they can't define physiologically why. I
Mhm.
attended a seminar about 15 years ago. I watched a guy who was awake. They performed abdominal surgery on him, and he was awake with no anesthesia.
Oh.
And
Whoa.
I was like, somebody get that guy some gas, because there were moments where he was he was feeling some of the procedure, but
Oh.
and also coincidentally, the doctors were from Wuhan, China.
Oh.
I'm, as a physician, I'm sitting there going, oh, this is all kind of scary. But you know,
Yeah.
they stitched him up and everything was fine, and he had a good recovery. And they removed the polyp, and Bob's your uncle. But here was the
Wow.
we don't know the physiology. So if I don't know why it works in
Mhm.
here in the United States or in the Western world, I can't employ it. You know,
Mhm.
um,
That's understandable.
also many of the those holistic crystals and all that other stuff. uh,
Mhm.
they barely the data barely has a significance over placebo. Like I give you a sugar pill. It again, because
Yeah.
the human mind is very interesting.
Mental.
It can it can do what? It can heal
It,
itself to an extent.
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
You guys notice when you're sick and you have a positive outlook, like, yeah, I'm sick, I don't have to go to work. How many times you get well like so fast? But
Mhm.
when you're like, oh, I'm sick, oh my God, there's so many things to go to work, my kids, who's gonna do this, who's gonna that, I really got to get back to work. And then what happens? You get even sicker,
Yeah.
because we now know the physiology of it, right? Emotion equals cortisol, right?
Right.
And that's a problem, right? So that's why we also have to look at our patients' demeanor. That's why we could never really have a bad day in front of our patients.
Mhm.
Unfortunately, you can have a bad day, but you're gonna have to spin it. You know what I'm saying? Like every day, to be honest with you, when I was in the ward as a resident, was a really crappy day. I
Yeah.
had little to no happy memories as a practicing physician. All of it was actually soul crunching. But
Mhm.
if you saw my face, hi, good morning, I'm Dr. Garais. Hey, how you doing? You doing good? Yeah, I'm really positive about. But inside, I'm going, I hate you, I hate you, I hate you. I used to curse a lot, but I regret that. I wish I could go back and just change my attitude, because then I would still be practicing.
Mhm.
And I'll be honest with you, I miss it. I miss it, even though it paid garbage. I miss it. We're
Yeah.
going to go to your textbook in a moment. So that's my message a lot to my students. Mitigate your emotions, because you guys spent a lot of money, or will spend a lot of money on your education, and spend a lot of time to do the thing that you want to do. But be careful what you ask for, uh,
Mhm.
because after 16, 20 years of education, that's all I ever wanted to be. I wanted to be part of the team. I wanted to be part of the elite. And then once you're there, you're like, oh my God, I don't want to be part of this. This is not what I signed on for. But
Mhm.
actually, it is. This is what I signed on for. And I'm not kidding. Waking up at 5 a.m., going home at 10 every day, while everyone else is enjoying life and, their kids and their family, you get to be mired in people's misery all day. But if you don't have the proper attitude about it, why do you think medical personnel, a lot of them get sick? A lot of them have, medical personnel have a 30% more risk for a drug addiction and alcoholism, right? They have a higher risk for spousal abuse, higher risk for abuse of their children. And I'll be honest with you, my marriage during my residency was on fire.
Wow.
My wife left me for over a year while I was a resident, because she was like, "You handle this residency. I can't handle you." Because imagine being frustrated and tired every time you come home, and then your wife goes, "Hey, why don't you play with your newborn child?" And I go, "Why? I need to sleep. Leave me alone." it goes, isn't that your job to feed her? Imagine that attitude. And it's ugly. But that's where my head was at. My head wasn't on right. And of course, what would I do in the entire time? Drinking. So does that help anything? No, right? It doesn't numb anything. It actually makes things far worse, right? So if you don't mitigate your emotions, that's also the problem here in the United States. It's not all these problems like drug addiction or whatever. I've shared this with, bear with me, who've had me before. The American Psychiatric Association, their president once said this: America's number one problem isn't the opioid crisis. It isn't major depressive disorder. It's not bipolar. America's number one problem is we cannot let go of the past.
Yes.
If you had a bad day, you will bring it home. If you grew up in the American culture, you will bring it home. So if I'm telling you this now, you learn how to do what? Share it with your family. And then maybe you guys can have a laugh together. That's why my wife is so much better at the medical game than I am. When she has a crappy day, I let her vent, and then we talk about it and we laugh about it and we make fun of her patients. And it's not an ethical thing to do, but you know, it gets it off chest. And then the next day she's ready to rock and roll and she's ready to work.
Is that like a learned behavior
Yeah.
in the American society from like you're used to seeing like your parents acting like that one?
Because remember, if you remember your anatomy and physiology, there's nature and there's nurture. Unfortunately, again, according to the American Psychiatric Association, from an article written about a couple years ago, they found now that 40% of behaviors are genetic. That's scary.
Yeah.
That means if your parents were drug addicts and alcoholics, you are in a bad place already. And then if you grew up watching it, that's your nurture. And you grew up who had friends, right? Like here's a classic example. I've told you funny stories about the Garais family, but in reality, it's not funny. We're alcoholics, all of us. That's why we have heart disease and diabetes and all these problems, right? And the Garais family, they're very macho, so they don't talk about things. I grew up with the word warrior culture. We're warriors. Suck it up. Cry for weak people. So that's your nurture or lack of nurture. I think my father stopped showing any affection or emotion. I think I was 5 or 6 because, quote, goes, I got to toughen you up because you're a crybaby. I've been told that my entire life. You were a crybaby. And you were, he goes, I was born very premature. And he goes, yeah, we thought you were going to die. Like they ripped me off. I'm not even barely born. And my family wrote me off. But then they're like, but you were part of the warrior culture. That's how you survived. And I go, no, maybe the incubator you had me in for 8 months. Maybe that's the reason why I survived. Maybe the doctor who actually nurtured me. Maybe that's why I survived.
Maybe it was medical intervention, but let's not, you know.
Yeah, he goes, not none of y'all. But again, I could sit there and mire in that, which I have when I was younger, right? But I can do what? I can learn from that and now do what? And that's now, like my family looks at me, why do you coddle your son when he falls? Because he's hurt. They actually criticize me because let him fall, let him cry, let him bleed. That's a quote.
Wow.
Let them fall, let them cry, let them bleed, let them get up on their own. It teaches them how to be stronger. And from my knowledge of child psychology, and he goes, no, it does not. It teaches them that they're alone. Right? And I follow what? Data-driven evidence, right? And I have 2 very successful adult children, but they're following that same path, and it is ugly. But what did I do? I skirted the path of addiction and alcoholism. So guess what? My 2 oldest, do they drink? Do drugs? No, they don't do any of that. And I didn't have to tell them because why? They were nurtured in a world where drinking is for stupid people. Even though but they'll be like, but Papa, you drink, and he goes, well, I'm stupid, and this is stupid delicious. So leave me alone. But I've totally went No alcohol a couple years back because of all my physical stuff, and I'm telling you, don't miss it.
Mm-hmm.
Nature versus nurture. So knowing and understanding that, can you now know and start looking at your patient differently?
Yes.
Like you can't just write them off like, oh, that patient's a jerk. You have to now look at them like, hey, something caused them to be something.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you can't just look at them like you can't just look at the bad patient as, oh, they're just being an a-hole.
Mm-hmm.
No, there's a reason behind it. And if you have that empathy, you can care for your patient better.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And we all have biases, all of us.
Mm-hmm.
Let's all be honest. I got into a serious conversation with a good friend of mine about race, and
Mm-hmm.
she did the classic thing, but I don't see color. And I go, that's a load of crap. We see all different kinds of colors, all of us. All of us have biases. But what does a professional and what does a good person do? You look at the person at their history of who they are, right? And then all your biases, that's funny. Then they tend to all go away because now you're looking at the person as an individual and as individualized data. And that's a better way to look at people instead of, because you guys know I already have a thing against crackheads personally. In my personal life, people who, because they're a revolving door and they don't die and they're constantly taking time away from my patients who really need me. That's the reason why your grandmother is suffering in a hallway, because I have to take care of 20-year-old Johnny who just keeps on doing cocaine all day.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And it used to offend me, but now I'm going, no, that's my job. And that's what I have to do. Right? So when you're looking at that, right, it shouldn't depress you but once you know and understand the physiology of who your patient is and also yourself, who you are, then what can you do? You can now work towards what? And that's what I was telling the class last night. I was lecturing last night, and I was telling, because someone asked them, how do you get over this stress of COVID and life and the quote unquote new normal?
Mm-hmm.
Every night, especially the nights I can't sleep, I just focus on everything that will not make me happy, but make me a better whatever. Better parent, better father. Like the other night, I started playing piano again. I haven't played piano in like over 20 years because all I had in my mind was negative connotations. My mother used to hold piano ransom over me. Like, oh, you can't do sports unless you do piano. And I don't know if you guys know, playing a musical instrument in an overtly macho family, do you think that's a really good idea? Right?
Yeah.
All I got from my cousins, who are my older, more abusive brothers and sisters that I never had. Hey, what's with the piano, you fag, you fag? And I'm like, "Ugh."
Wow.
And you're like, why don't you go in sports? You didn't even make varsity. But he goes, hey, twinkle toes, hey, twinkle fingers. And I was like, ah. But my mother foresaw what? Something different.
Yeah.
That my son goes, and she's not a Garais. So she doesn't have that culture and she can't stand my father's family, right? She made sure that. And because my mother's side is more cerebral, they're the medical people. They're all the nurses, the home health aides, and all that. The Grice family, they're all the warriors. They're all, I call them the family of exes. They all have ex-husbands and ex-wives, but they're all ex-military, and they're all ex-special operations, Navy intel. They all are the, supposed creme de la creme of military service. I remember even my cousin saying stuff about, he used to make fun of, when I didn't make recon for the second time, he goes, oh, you're a pogue. Pogue is personnel other than grunts. It's a very, very negative term for, people who do administrative work and things like that in the military, because you're not a trigger man, and my uncle used to say stuff like, you went to jungle warfare school. Oh, what a waste. Now I could sit there and take that and keep it, or you can do what? Throw it out. Now when he says that stuff to me, I'm like, yep, nope. Then he goes, I'm gonna try being gay today. Got my rainbow shirt on, and it pisses him off. And, I act very gay around my uncle because it pisses him off. I'm like, hey, old man. He goes, I'm thinking of getting divorced. And he the other week, because he was telling me how Isabella's 13. You didn't teach her how to shoot. You taught Chanel how to shoot when she was 13. And I'm like, he goes, well, I'm teaching her how to do expressive bongo dancing and, and he goes, and flower arrangement. And he gets all angry. And do you see how you can use also reverse psychology on people who make you angry? You kill them with kindness. You kill them with laughter. You kill them with comedy. And what happened to my relationship with my uncle? It didn't implode. This is our banter, and I still love him, and he still loves me. Instead of us screaming at each other. My cousin, his son, it's not the same. They're both warriors, but he moved all the way to France just to get away from his father.
Wow.
All the way to France to get away from his wife. Why? Because they're not learning the lesson, right? And how's his health? It's awful. He's only 6 years older than me, and he has way more problems than me. All right, enough of my stuff and about my theories on psychiatry. And by the way, they're not only just theories. I've shared with you guys, my mother is not only a professor in psychiatry, in clinical psychiatry, she's also an author, and also she was chief of staff at several New York hospitals. So a lot of my theories here is from speaking to my mother and talking to her about, life and the family, and all of these updates I get from her regarding psychiatry. That's why I'm quoting the American Psychiatric Association a lot, because every time she goes to CMEs, she's not computer savvy. So it's always like, bah, fix the computer, and stay with me. So, when she goes on the computer and she takes her continuing medical education credits, who's right next to her? I have to be, because apparently she might have this advanced degrees, but she doesn't know left click versus right click on a mouse. I am not exaggerating. Which is it? This one, this button, this button. It's really, maybe some of you have parents who are like, what the hell? You're a smart human being. This is an on button. Oh, where's the on button? This? Huh? Oh, trying to show your parents how to update your phone, especially your parents. My mom is 78, 79 years old. It's an adventure.
Yeah, my grandma's the same way.
And
She's
you're like,
around that age.
you're like, please, right?
My parents are opposite. My mom worked for Amazon Web Services, so she knows how to do project management stuff. But my dad's
at least one person who, when you give them electronic instructions, they don't have to call you. My mother calls me because sometimes, us medical personnel, we're insomniacs. So at 1:30 in the morning, are you awake? And I go, I'm awake now. He goes, I can't find the website. And I go, Mom, give me your VPN code. What's that? And I'm like, oh. So I go on her VPN. I actually remotely affect her computer. So a couple weeks ago at 1:30 in the morning, she and I are connected on Zoom, and we're watching COVID updates, the Harvard COVID updates.
Oh, wow.
And my mom the whole entire time, bah, ask this question. And I go, why? Are you embarrassed? No, I don't know where my microphone is. And I'm like, oh, Jesus. And then I ask the question, and it starts a hullabaloo online. And my mother can't, and then my mother is on her cell phone calling my cell phone. Tell that bastard from Michigan, this is what I think of her study. And I'm like, okay, Mom. And I'm like, Dr. So-and-so, well, according to data that I have, and then I can't say in my 45 years experience as a psychiatrist, right? Because she was challenging my curriculum vitae, and it's on LinkedIn, and she looked it up, and she's like, well, Dr. Garais, I see here on LinkedIn you're an internist. What do you know about psychiatry and the psychiatry of COVID? And I'm like, well, and then my earpiece, and I'm going, he goes, tell her to shut up. Tell her, shut up. And I'm like, Mom, I can't tell another colleague of mine who actually is a director of the CDC in Michigan to shut the fudge up, because I don't think that's going to work. And this is at 1 o'clock in the morning. Yeah, doctors are up that late. And continuing medical education live sessions. Oh, the live session started at midnight.
Wow.
Because when do doctors have time? They don't have time during the day, right? Shift ends at 10:30, and maybe you have some charting. So they put options that late. And I'm like, and of course my mom calls me and said, oh, come on, it's COVID, it's important. I'm like,
So
right?
where would you advise going to like what website or something to go to
Well,
for proper
this is what I
research?
do. Of course, the stuff that we train you for discussions. Thank you for getting me back on track, Miss Witchen. Discussions, right? Look at .gov, .edu. You try to look for the latest. You know, not 2015, 2016, 2000, 2020, and then you look at the data. You look at it all together, and then you ask yourself, does it make any sense? The next thing you have to ask yourself is, what political party may be affecting their budget, right? I used to think that CDC, NIH, and all that were infallible. Not anymore,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because now I see some of the numbers. And oh, by the way, I just found out the other day that all the data on mass shooting. Hey, remember mass shooting? No one likes to talk about that anymore because it's
Yeah,
not a hot topic anymore, is it?
Yeah.
right,
As if people aren't getting shot anymore.
right.
People and kids are still getting shot. I'm sorry, right?
Yeah.
But I always believed the data because it was on every news and came from a single guy. I always believed the data until I read the story in the Atlantic that when, because you know, when you have, like for discussions, when you have research, right? You're supposed to make all your research data open and your methodology open for others to emulate, so other people can copy it and redo it to prove that what your findings are correct, right? And that's called peer review. Well, this guy, right, since he's now all famous now and on CNN and on all these you know, all on Fox and Friends and all that, this guy doesn't want to share any of his data. So these
That's
independent
sketchy.
laboratories started looking up the world data for you know, mass shootings. Guess what they found out? Is America number one? No, America's number 26.
Really?
Think about it. And I'm from
Hmm.
a third world, I'm from a so-called third world or developing country. They don't like using terms like third world anymore. But the Philippines is a developing country. Like, if you guys think police are brutal here, you can be snatched up from your home, interrogated, tortured, and killed in the Philippines, and no one will bat an eyelash. It happened to my neighbor. They thought he was a drug mule when he was just, you know, the neighborhood kid, and the cops were questioning him. He got scared, he ran, so they put two in his head. Then they sprinkled a little crack on him, right? And then they said, oh, see, he was delivering drugs. And me and my grandmother know, I mean, my mother-in-law, he's a good kid. He's never did drugs in his life. Now all of a sudden he's a drug mule. Now his ailing mother has nobody to make money for him because that was his job during this quarantine. He got a quarantine pass and he was delivering groceries and whatever anyone needed for people who weren't able to get a quarantine pass. And the cops thought, my numbers are down for this month.
That's horrible. It's
Yeah.
absolutely
Oh, the
horrible.
Philippines, traffic cop can pull you over, flash his badge and his weapon. You got to give him 200 pesos. If you don't, they take your car, they take everything. Right?
Yeah.
Me, because I show them my weapon. They're not taking anything from me. That's why when I go home, it's love and hate. It's scary. And on the highway, they're called highwaymen. There's people who have there's these gangsters. They have a toll, and you got to pay the toll. And what's the toll? They look around your trunk. They see whatever they like in your trunk, and they give them a couple of bucks, and whatever they take, they take. So when I go to the province, when I drive to the province, I make sure I get, you know, little knickknacks, you know, little things here and there, right? Maybe
Mhm.
a MP3 player, a used laptop, and you give it to the highwaymen so they don't shoot you in the face. So
Jesus.
when we're now here in this country, yes, there's police brutality. Yes, there's horrible things, but there are far worse places, far worse.
Mhm.
I have my son. Some of the stories he's relaying to me from Afghanistan. It is the wild, wild west, and a lot of the warlords there take total advantage of it. And these people don't have much. So, but what do they have? They have their bodies, don't they?
Mhm.
He was telling me about how they can pick up your son and daughter, use them for a while, and then give them back to you. And that's taxes. Imagine they have that here. Take away your kid, rape them, give them back to you, and then maybe do it next month again.
Ugh, that's making me sick.
It made well when I was in Somalia and Eritrea, it happened all the time. They have a penchant for little boys, and we couldn't do a darn thing because it's not war crime. It's not our business. Our business was to protect American property, and when we saw stuff, we can't do anything. But so that's why my thing is, our country is extremely flawed, but I kind of still love it. Nowhere else I'd rather live. Yeah, we don't really have freedoms. Yeah, we don't really have rights, but there are other places where they definitely don't have any freedom. They definitely have no rights. At least we have some. Yeah. I know that's not a good argument, but it's something that gets me through the day.
Be grateful for what you do have.
Things I'm confused. And by the way, has anything really changed? No, not really. And there'll be a new hot topic next month. Everyone will forget about race relations next month, and there'll be something else, right? And then my thing was, what about race relations? We didn't tackle that yet. Why are we all forgetting? Yeah, that's how the media goes, and that's why we as professionals, you see how I brought it back? That's why we as professionals have to only look at data, and that's why I love the medical field, because do you notice in the medical field, no one gives a damn where you're from? Yeah. No one cares, you're rich, poor, or whatever. They care purely about what? Performance. That's it, right? The doctors may act like it's class elitism, but no, at the end of the day, the doctors who do business are prized. The doctors who don't are shunned. It's that simple. Tasks, that's homework or any little homework that we have, or like quizzes like here, like you see here. And the lesson, of course, is here and the lab. So please show up because that's your lesson. So
okay, that makes more sense because I was looking at it and I wasn't entirely sure how everything. Yeah, because I didn't see like the lesson or anything. I just saw the discussion and the quiz. So I got a little confused as to where like any homework or anything was. So the homework
homework would be like the task would be like the quiz, and discussion, of course, discussion. And then, of course, the lesson is what? Did you attend lecture? And there's only two of you, but you know me. I'll call everybody else and say, hey, you want to have a makeup or I can give them a makeup assignment. So if you miss something, please get a call out to me. And I already got, there's supposed to be like 5 of you or something like that. I already got emails and calls from the other two, and the other one, she just got registered. So there should be only like 4 or 5 of you for lab. And if you look at everything that we're going to be looking at, it's like lab type things. That's why I wish this COVID thing would just go away, because we were in class today. This class notoriously used to go late because it has a lot of things in it that we get to practice and we get to do. Not because I yap a lot, but who am I kidding? Yeah, because I yap, right? So one thing you're going to see is these rubrics. And what's a rubric? And let's open them up. It's like how you do things from start to finish. And one rubric that's really important is when you do the interview, you're also critically thinking. Because remember, when you do the interview, you're my eyes and ears. I wasn't there to see how my patient reacted to questions. Okay? So let's go through this rubric on how we're supposed to do an interview. So one of the things that we have to do in an interview is we always have open-ended questions. That's questions where we allow the patient to talk. We don't say stuff like, an example of a closed-ended question is, hey, did you have a fever? So the patient will start going, yeah, I think I did. Do you see how you're like kind of like putting it in their head? Yeah. In the late 90s, psychologists, there was a massive outbreak of people who said they were abused by their parents. They found out that the majority of the people who claimed that they were abused by their parents, as adults, they found out many of them were in therapy with a psychologist. And the psychologist was saying stuff like, were there times where in your youth you felt an uncomfortable touch by your father? And then, if you said that to me, I'd be like, you know what? There were a couple of times. And then it'll get in my head, he's an abuser. when he did absolutely nothing of the sort.
Isn't it like called false memories or something like that?
Yeah, because you're doing what? And memory is tricky because memory is attached to emotion, right? I always say that, oh, high school was the best time, college was the best time. When you really think about it, really?
I hated high school.
You're broke. In high school, I was getting into fights almost every week with somebody, like fist fights. My teachers thought I was either crazy or mentally retarded and told me to my face. They used to call me Crazy Eddie. So when I really analyzed my high school, was it fun? Not fun. That's awful. That's the grind. I like life now, as an adult. But I always think, oh, I was young, I was fast, I was this, I was that. So you could see how a closed question that requires a yes or no, it forces the patient to either not give you any details, like, oh, no, to be dismissive, or yes, oh, I think do you have any heart disease? You know what? I felt the pain after I ate that burrito in my chest. I think that's angina. Do you see what you could do to your patient if you did the wrong question?
Turning them into a hypochondriac.
Yeah, you make them start to be paranoid about how's this as an open question. So you said you had a stomachache. How did you feel about that? How'd that start? You see how it's open? Yeah. It's open to their interpretation. Tell me about it. I didn't tell them things. I'm not leading them that path. So an open-ended questions are the best. Now, the only time you have a closed question, yes or no, is in something called the review of systems. The review of systems is that little sheet, if you've ever went to the doctor's office, where you only have to answer yes or no. Have you ever been diagnosed with heart disease? Yes or no. Have you ever had any vision problems? Yes or no. It goes, have you ever been pregnant? Yes or no. That's your review of systems. That's a yes or no, and that's the only time you do closed closed questions. Open questions is in the interview. Encourage the patient. You have to hear it from them, right? Like how many times the patient told me, he goes, well, the doctor thinks I have sinusitis, and I go, what do you think you have? Why are you here? I always ask, why are you here? What brought you to my office? And that's how you get the chief complaint. The chief complaint should be in the words of the patient. So the chief complaint shouldn't be a medical diagnosis like Garais or sinusitis or dyspnea. Like, for example, dyspnea, the chief complaint would be patient had difficulty of breathing. Patient said that because every time I breathed, it felt like a weight was on my chest, unquote, right? Verbalize the implied, right? Like it goes, yeah, it was uncomfortable. So I asked, what do you mean by uncomfortable? Right? And they goes, it hurt. How much did it hurt? From a scale of 1 to 10. You see what I did there? Right? Instead of going, yeah, because women have an enormous, female patients have an enormous threshold of pain, especially one who has given birth. So pain to them is like, meh. But for a dude, you ask me, I'm like, oh my God, 8 out of 10, doctor. Woo, I was seeing stars, right? So you got to balance it. Every time they talk to me about pain, I'm like, I am the biggest baby about pain. I'll be honest with you. In honesty, like a level 3 would be like a 5 or a 6 to me. I would tell the whole world about my pain. But my wife, who's had all these kids, she won't tell the doctor squat, right? And she's like, yeah, okay. She does that, and it kills me because her gynecologist, her obstetrics gynecologist, will sit there and goes, okay, and I go, you're not gonna probe? That's a problem of having training. You see other people back off, and you're like, come on now, we're professionals. You're not only paying attention to what they say and how they say it, pay attention to how they act. Body language, okay? In your text, and please look over the text. I will have another video on the actual chapter because I'm going to go into greater detail in an extra video. You can tell if they're lying. Those of you who have children, you can tell, right?
Oh yeah.
They have this angelic face. No, Papa, I'd never do that. But You see, they have crossed arms. They're not directly making eye contact. Maybe their shoulders are askew. They're not facing towards you. It's one thing that me and my wife used to love doing when we used to go to restaurants. We used to love people who were obviously on first dates, and we used to love to look at their body language. I know we're awful people, but it was hilarious. And you could
Yeah,
see
actually,
where,
that's
you could see where these dates went really wrong. And also you can also see where it's a Tinder date too, where they're really into each other sexually, and you're like, oh man, it's on. Look at that body language. Look at that. Oh, look at the eye contact. Oh, look where her hands are.
like watching a train wreck sometimes.
Yeah, you're like, and me and my wife, we try not to stare, but we both have
Yeah,
training.
look
We both
away.
giggle a lot, and my wife and my wife, geez, I feel guilty. And a game that I've shared with you guys that me and my mom play in the mall, because both of our arthritis, we can't go on the mall too much, right? So when we sit down in the food court, we play this game named That Diagnosis. So my mother looked around in the crowd. Somebody near Chick-fil-A has a neurologic. I'll give you a minute to see who it is. And because of their body language, the way they talk, the way they act, the way they order their food, if you have training, you can tell, right? You can tell who's the addict in the room. You can tell a whole bunch of things. And me and my mom, of course, my mom, she's got the clinical eye of House, MD. And that's what's really cool about if you've ever met a consultant. The consultant is the high guru priestess of the medical world. They know way too much. How many times my mother has come into a room, didn't look, just like House, didn't look at any data and looked up the patient up and down. And you're like, why is she in here? She doesn't have a neurologic. I think she has cancer. And then she walks out the room. And then guess what they had? Guess what they found? The MRI found the astrocytoma. And then I asked my mom, and I go, Mom, how the hell did you do that? Oh, you look at him. He had nystagmus left. And he goes, and also he had a little slur in his speech. So all of it looks like right brain, most common male, 45 to 55 is astrocytoma. And I'm like, holy crap. And I looked at my mom, like, what are you? Because what are you, Dr. Strange? Right? And my mother was like, no, I'm educated. And because all your stupid residents in that room, including you, are not. And then she walks out of the room and you're like, what the fudge? And then she's right. She used the skill sets that I'm outlining here, but they're honed, And so she saw it immediately. And nystagmus is when
training and study.
Yeah, have you ever met somebody who, when they move their eyeballs, it shakes a little? It shakes a little through the direction. And my mother picked that up from not even 4 feet from the patient.
Wow.
Oh, she picked up my son who has autism. She picked up that he had a stroke when he was an infant. She was like,
wow.
He said, you got to get him to a neurologist. And I go, why? And Nelson Hermie was barely 1 year old. There's asymmetry in his left. It goes in his left on his smile and his eye. And I go, no, it isn't. And then I took a really good look and I was staring at my son. And I go, oh, shit. I agreed with her. And it took me to stare at my son for minutes. And then, oh my God. And guess what happened? He had a stroke.
Wow.
And my mom saw it. And my mom goes, I didn't want to see it. And he goes, that's my grandson. Right? And I go, but to me, it was clear as day. And you know what? That diagnosis led us to an early diagnosis, early intervention. So that's why my son is a high functioning autistic young adult.
Right. I was about to say, like,
1 year old, my mother saw something that several pediatricians, and it goes, did not.
Right. I'm like gonna say, because it's probably a curse to have that knowledge and that kind of education sometimes, but especially when it comes to your family, it's probably really good.
Not to my mom. My mom just sees it as, unfortunately, she's an elitist snob because that I'm better than you. How many times has she said that to my face? And I'm like, ugh. And he goes, but you know what? That's my mom. And me knowing and dealing with that, now we don't butt heads about our careers.
Right. I mean, because the way you talk about her, it sounds like you guys are like on a good, like friendly.
Yeah, we are. But she'll always, when when anyone ever talks to her, how's your son? Oh, he's still a teacher. I don't- That's how she talks. You raise them, and sometimes they don't turn out so good. And she does that, and I used to hate it, but now I'm like, that's just how she talks. I
Yeah.
know she loves me. I know she's proud of me, but that's
Mhm.
just how she talks.
Yeah.
And
Sounds like kind of a tease.
I gotta accept that. And
Mhm.
she's very tough-skinned, so that kind of teasing doesn't bother her. But to me, for years, to be honest, led me to
Mhm.
therapy. It made me feel like a loser.
Right.
Like I have an MD, I have a master's degree in physical chemistry, and I still feel like I'm nobody. I'm a former vice president of academics. I garnered that tier one corporate position in a Fortune 500 company. I was only 33. You know what my mom said to me?
Mm.
I remember the day I became a VP. My dad goes, "Oh, hope you get stock options." They didn't say congratulations or anything. My father goes, "Hope you get stock options. They're probably not going to pay you as much because you're a kid." And then my mother looked at me and went, she sighed because she was like, "So you're not going back to your residency?" I'm like, "No, mom. I make 3 times more than what a resident would make." And then she goes, "It's not about the money." And I was so angry on a day that I should be what?
Very happy. Yeah, I hear you.
Happy as punch. But instead, I felt stupid. So what did I do that day? I hammered down an entire bottle of Jack in a kid's party.
Oh, geez.
Because why? My mom
Because
says,
you're
right? Recognize the signs.
right.
Every time I've been assaulted is because I was emotional and I didn't really look at my patient. I told you guys about the lady who tried to cut my neck with a spork.
Yep.
I was so pissed at her for being a pill seeker that I didn't notice that she's breathing hard. Her pupils are dilated. She's looking right at me. Something was about to go down, but I was like, "Fudge you, lady. I was being dismissive. I was ignoring her, and
Mm-hmm.
I was what? Alone.
Mm-hmm.
If I noticed she was getting that angry, I should have did what?
Gotten extra
I
help.
should have either gotten help or
With the
brought her
kind
down.
of-
You ever
Mm.
because I used to love the show Cops, but now it just makes me ramped up, so I don't watch it anymore. But I always used to like seeing the attitude of veteran cops versus these young guys and gals. You ever see the young guys and gals on Cops? They're like so quick, they already got the latch off their weapon, right? And they're running towards the scene with their weapon. You ever see a supervisor get out of the car? They're like, okay, let's see what's going on. Ooh, this guy's got a gun. Hey, Mr. Davis, you got a gun in your hand. Can you put that down, please? Yeah, and I'm sitting there like, shoot him, shoot. But the supervisor knows what. I bring out my gun, he'll start shooting. I
Right.
don't want that. So I want to do what? I want to bring the room down. And that's what
Mm-hmm.
a good medical professional does. Because every time that I've been assaulted or every time that a patient lunged at me is because I was being dismissive. I was trying to be the boss of the room. I was being arrogant. And the patient just got angrier and angrier and angrier instead of what? You bring them down, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So yeah, or you just walk in the room and goes, "Okay, Miss Jones, I know you're very angry at me. I'm sorry that you're angry at me, but can I leave the room, please? Okay, so I'll be right back. Okay, I'm very sorry. I'm really sorry." You see how I'm like lowering my voice, and I'm play acting right now. I wish you guys could see me, because I can't share my. I actually lower my head and I don't make eye contact, and then I slowly walk out of the room, but I'm still facing my patient just in case she wants it. And I always say she.
Oh,
I've never been
so
lunged
with
at by a male. Well, yes, I
so
have. Who am I kidding?
with what you're saying, would that kind of go sort of into our discussion about a lying patient?
Yeah. So a lying patient, do you think you challenge them? Like, no. He goes, "No, dude." He goes, "Why are you lying to me, man?" Right? Do I do that to my patient? No. You
No.
go, "What? Okay." And they go, and then you don't challenge them. Do not challenge them, but just pose some questions like, "So you sure?" Because I read I read your other chart that you went to jail for drug possession. Are
Mm-hmm.
you sure you're not doing any drugs? Because I'm not a cop, nor am I your priest. So anything you tell me is confidential. Do you see my tone?
Yeah, because you're talking to them like, they're an actual human being, number one, and number two, you're trying to give them a safe place in order
Yeah,
to divulge that
like
information so you
because
can give them a
many of
proper
them are
diagnosis.
like, "No, you're gonna tell my parole officer," right? Because I worked in New York City in the 90s and early 2000s where everything was crack, 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 crack. Everyone was on, I barely saw any, because crack is cheaper than everything, right? So it was really hard. It was super obvious they were drug addicts, but how many times I'm like, hey, he goes, he goes, you know you like The Rock, right? Everyone likes The Rock. Come on, man. Come on.
Mm-hmm.
Tell me, you do a lot, or you just like, or you just party every once in a while? You see what I'm doing?
Yeah.
I'm not calling them out on it, really. I'm trying to be on their side.
Yeah.
And then they're like, what do you know about that? And I'm like, and I go, well, I don't know anything about that. Maybe you can like tell me about it, because, I don't know, I'm a sheltered child, man. But in actuality, I have a lot of training. I know exactly what's going on. I know exactly what you're taking. I just need to hear it from you, right? So I can put it on the chart, right?
So what you're saying as a doctor, what you would do first is like, again, talk to them like they're a normal human being, try to become like, I guess, friends, so to speak, and give them a safe place to talk.
Yeah, give them trust, earn their trust. And the problem is you don't have a lot of time, and they don't know you from Adam, right? So it's a skill set, and it's hard. It's easy to talk about it in a lecture, but it takes some doing, and it takes some time, and working with people, and the people who and it's fortunate if you grew up in a place that wasn't optimal. Growing up, like when I was growing up in New York, there were times where like, my mom's a doctor. Why don't we have money? Because residents make nothing, right? And you know what? Actually, was the best training ground on how to talk to somebody and how to talk to drug addicts, because my whole apartment building is full of them, right?
Yeah, I found the discussion a little difficult to try to answer in the first place, not being in that situation, because it depends on what the situation is. You know what I mean?
Yeah, but look at the protocols on how would you address the situation. And part of this protocol is what? I'm going to try to do what? Garner some trust. I'm going to get the anger level down. If they're screaming, you got to bring them into another room and let them scream it out, right? And let them have their say. How many times that, a patient will be like, I'm talking here. And then I just sit there quietly and go, what do you want to say?
Okay.
Let me talk. And I go, okay, Mr. Jones, go ahead. And I'll just sit there and let him talk. All right. Or if they're not ready to talk, okay, Mr. Davis, Ms. Davis, I'm just going to have you in the room here for a while. When you're ready, you can knock on the door and the nurse will tell me to come in. Okay.
Okay.
Right. Because I don't have time to just sit there and wait. I got to go with the other patients. And in time, it goes, and then that's another way that we can garner their trust, and it's hard. And again, like you said, it's case by case, but it's something that you got to pay attention to. Now, doing the child is difficult because, in pediatrics, like if you ask a child who's in pain, where does it hurt? Everywhere. Does your hair hurt? Yes. How about your eyelashes? Yes, especially my eyelash, especially this one. And you're like, oh, this is not going to. So you have to do what? Garner that trust with the guardian, and be careful, because there's also misinterpretation. And many times, if the guardian is bilingual and the guardian or parent are bilingual, and the child is the one that answering in English, there might be something that gets lost in the translation. I've had that happen to me several times. So regarding the child, you speak to them not like a child, because they'll get just as angry as a patient, right?
Right.
Like if you speak in a condescending tone, and a child, they're smaller than you. So get to your eye level, right? Don't all of us feel uncomfortable when you get pulled over and a police officer is standing there and you're sitting in your car and they're looking down on you?
Yeah.
That's how a child feels. And police officers do that on purpose. I told you, the Garais family are they're military and police. My cousin is a New Jersey State Trooper, and they're hard as steel because they drive alone.
Yeah.
Those cars alone.
Yeah.
Right?
I mean,
So I asked him, I'm like, do you guys have to have the most powerful flashlight in the world? And do you have to put that in my eye? And he goes, yes. And he was like, that's protocol. He goes, I make sure you're blind so I can see.
Yeah.
I make sure you're intimidated and nice and scared so that I'm safe. And I'm like, seriously? Don't you think that might ramp somebody up? And And he goes, yeah, that's what my SIG is for, his weapon. And I'm like, and now I see his attitude, and now you see that, oh my God, if the cop is just as scared as a potential perpetrator, Jesus, no wonder everyone's shooting everybody. Right? Can we all just take it all down 2 or 3 notches? But that's his training. He is not. And to be honest with you, I can easily see how we also, as medical professionals, can get into that attitude, us versus them. You know, because us, the Blue Scrub Club, versus them, the patient, the stupid, non-compliant patient. Let's not get into that, because I was a victim of that a lot when I was practicing.
Well, I mean, doesn't it also go with, like, you know, similar to customer service? You're working with a patient, you're essentially working with a customer you're trying to help, and they're, you know,
they're
getting angry, and you're getting angry, and it's a domino effect in a way.
Or they're scared and they don't want to give it up. They don't want to give up anything to you. So that's actually another protocol that I'll be adding, the protocol of the scared patient and the protocol of the angry patient. What are the protocols on how to deal with that? Now the rest is, of course, wash your hands charting, and I'll go over that as well. But what happened?
Well, are you able to go over, like, in the other question for the discussion? I don't mean to keep bringing it back to this discussion.
No, I'm going to go over discussion right now, because you asked 2 very good questions about it. So I can give you,
Yeah, I've never had problems with any of your discussions before, but because something like this is a case-by-case basis, it's like a little hard to answer sometimes, because you never know what you're going to get when it comes to each patient. But I would think, like, writing it down, not being like biased or whatever, would be like, you just have to do it as professional as you can, because you're working with actual, like, legal documents. So you really can't say anything bad about the patient in their own file, can you?
You can, if it is germane to the diagnosis. For example, the patient's cursing you out, right? You can't say, this piece of uneducated trash said this to me. No, that's an opinion.
Right.
You have to state, patient was quite upset, and use profanity all throughout the interview.
Right. Well, to me, that would be obviously the professional way to do it. Obviously, you can't, like, say anything, like you said the first time, oh, this piece of crap, like, you know, was just cursing at me the whole time. No, just say, you know, patient had an increased anger.
Patient was belligerent, was non-cooperative, was yelling, was warned twice to lower her voice. She complied during the second request, but was still angry and adamant about her point of view.
Right, and that's what you would write in the file.
Yeah.
Okay.
I have a quick question about files, like patient files. So say if you go to, like, the ER, and then maybe, like, you have your primary care doctor's, like, appointment, like, a month or so later. Does that file get passed around to, like, all your medical professionals?
No, the file, this is a nice little thing about MED140 when we talk about the file. Are you in my MED140 class as well? Or
no, I already took that, but I don't remember talking about that.
Well, when the file belongs to the facility, and there's only 3 reasons why the file should be shared with anybody: for treatment, for processing of payment, and for so treatment, processing of payment, and or logistics. Like, let's say, for example, we're doing a study on everyone who has hypertension, and you have hypertension. They don't add your name in it, but your data will be there, right? So let's say, for example, we have a patient, and we'll call him Mr. Brown, right? You're a clinician, I'm a clinician, but I'm assigned to Mr. Brown, you are not. You have no right to be going into his file, right? Only the people who are dealing with your management get to look at that file, right? And the billers only get to look at specific things about the file. They're not allowed to go in and go, actually, my wife just had that training, and that's called HIPAA. And that should have been in your MED 140 class.
Yeah, I remember that.
Right? And
yeah.
The HIPAA training, my wife goes, oh man, I violated HIPAA a million times. And I go, why? Since she works for Inova, she has access to all the Inova files. So you know what she started doing? She started looking up all her children. When she was on break, she started looking up all her children, and her supervisor caught it.
Oh.
And told her, hey, Millie, I saw unauthorized access for for the database. And my wife goes, huh? And she goes, yeah, you can't look up your kids. So they actually monitor you and they record you. So in a hospital setting, be careful. Now my wife is super paranoid because I tell you, I curse a lot. It's just, I don't know, the New Yorker, the Marine in me, the frat boy in me, who knows? When I'm at home, I curse a lot. Everything is F this, S this. Like my kids already have it up to their eyeballs. And it's funny because none of my children curse. But I curse a lot. So I'm not allowed during office hours. I'm not allowed during office hours in her office when she is conducting business as an administrator for Inova, because everything on the phone, her headpiece, and the computer is recorded. And my wife goes, I heard the recording. You're sitting there and it goes, because I was complaining about this and this person at work, and I called them a mother jumper and this and that. And my wife goes, it was on the tape. And then I'm like, ooh, and I'm like, ooh, sorry. She goes, yeah, and she said a funny word. I love people who have English as a second language. English is my wife's second language. And she used the word banished. And I'm like, you are now banished from my office. And I'm like, banished? And I go, what are you in England? And I'm like, and it's because why? Everything has to be conducted for the safety and professionalism for our patient, which is our client. So how do you deal with a patient who's lying? You try to do what? And you look up data and protocols that tell you. And how do you document this without sounding biased? Like you can't say on a chart, oh, it was obvious that the patient was lying. How many nursing and medical personnel and doctors write that? The patient was obviously lying to me. No, it's not obvious. But if I write down, patient claims no drug abuse, but previous history states that patient was incarcerated at Rikers Island for approximately 2 years for possession of crack cocaine, heroin, and marijuana with intent to sell.
Wow.
Reports from the patient halfway house states that the patient still is actively using heroin, right? So that shows what? Patient, liar, liar, pants on fire, without me saying, like without me saying a biased statement that patient's lying to me. So find a protocol somewhere on how to deal with a lying patient, because they're non-compliant. They're messing with you.
Right. I've been Googling it. It's just really tough for some reason, it's tough for me to find something like that on Google. It's not giving me a lot of information.
So when you guys have some issues with Google and Google's not working, can I go into library services? Can I go contact Miss Zoe Page? Yeah, do that today. She's in the office today, I believe, or maybe not. Can't remember. Why did I say that? Why do I say that when I'm not quite sure? So I'm going to make another extra video because it's now 10:19. Or you know what?